Have you ever thought about whether your siblings remember your childhood the same way you do, even though you grew up in the same house? That's exactly the kind of question that stayed with me after reading Hot Water by Bhavika Govil. It's a story about secrets, especially the ones parents keep, and how those silences transform the lives of their children. In Hot Water, we step into the world of Meera, Ashu, and Ma. We see what they share with one another, what they keep inside, and what the children try to make sense of on their own. Bhavika has this way of writing that makes you feel like you're right there inside her characters' heads. It's nostalgic, it's tender, and it makes you think. I'm excited to chat with her and introduce you to her book. Bhavika, welcome to the reading list.
Thank you so much, Ashna.
I'm so glad we could finally make this happen.
Me too.
Perfect. So, to begin with, let's introduce our listeners to your book, Hot Water.
Sure. So, Hot Water is essentially the story of one family. And it's a very close-knit yet unconventional family with a 9-year-old girl, Meera, 14-year-old Ashu, and their single mother, Ma. This family is joined at the hip, but they're separated by the things they're not saying to each other, the things they're concealing from each other. And it's sort of set over this one very humid, hot summer in India when these secrets start to come to the surface and the family starts to grow up and grow apart. To me, it's a book about childhood and what it's like to be a child in an adult's world, about love and the different ways in which we see it and feel it, and about grief.
I really like that you introduced the mother as Ma, because throughout the book we barely hear the mother's name, because the book is written through the perspective of the children. And as you're writing this, there's a different coming of age happening for both your main characters, Ashu and Meera. Ashu's the big brother and Meera's the younger sister. They're both growing up in the same house. But the way they're growing up and the kinds of conversations they're having with themselves are very different. How did you navigate that coming of age for them?
So it was very interesting for me to get into the headspace of both an 8-year-old girl, and who turns 9 actually, and a 14-year-old boy, a realm from which I've been very distant all my life, and see the ways in which they navigate the things that trouble them and the questions that riddle them at night. So, of course, they're siblings, and like any sibling duo or trio operates, they have their sort of codes, the things that unite them. They will, in one breath, fight for each other and with each other, turn against each other and hold a sword to the world if they say a word against their sibling. They are fighting over the chocolate cake in the fridge and who gets the front seat next to Ma. Sometimes on a more serious note, they're also fighting for Ma's attention in a way that we all are somewhat fighting for attention when there are 3 people in a room. But then Ashu is 14, right? He's an adolescent boy, and the world which he's navigating as an older sibling is much different from Meera's world. He sort of feels almost as though nobody can understand him. Mm-hmm. He's vacuum sealed into an experience that nobody can get inside of, and he can't get outside of either. And he's sort of looking at questions of his identity. He's being bullied at school, but he finds safe space outside of it. Mm-hmm. Home is also not the most comfortable terrain for him. So he has these questions of just who he is that he is navigating and who he loves and who he's loved by, most importantly. And then Meera's underestimated. She's 8, 9, and like most younger siblings, sort of, she's left out of conversations. The innuendos that Ashu is having with his friends and cousins, she doesn't quite get them, but she senses they're laughing about something other than the obvious. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also she really desperately wants to catch up to her brother and the things that he's experiencing at a way more rapid pace than she is. And therefore she's in search of becoming more grown up sooner than she can and looking for her own secret. And that's how I did it. I sort of got into both of their individual headspaces, which was so unique. So even though they're experiencing life in these distinct ways, they always come back together because home is not an option at that age. You come back to each other, you're in the same room, you're fighting over a blanket and who's taking up more space. You understand each other really well and sometimes see each other in ways the world doesn't. What's making somebody upset, angry, feel ignored. but you also miss the bigger things that somebody else might be going through.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes because of age and circumstance, like Mira and Ashu are just 4 years apart, so that's too much of a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we just aren't curious enough about the people in our lives to ask them more questions about what may be happening underneath the surface.
That's absolutely true. I remember there's this one scene in the book where where there's an incident at the swimming pool, um, and then Ma gets mad at Ashu, and then Ashu gets mad at Mira,
Yeah.
and then they don't talk to one another for a few days. But the way that they patch it up after, it just
Hmm.
reminded me so much of my own childhood, because you're right, you don't have an option.
Yeah.
You live with these people, you go to school with these people, you share a room with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
बात तो उन्हीं से करनी है अब.
That's what Mira says, that, most of the time they fight, but they forget about it, and
Yeah.
then they realize and give each other a look, oh, we were supposed to be in an argument right now. But this particular fight lingers a little bit
Yeah.
longer. And she's constantly trying to see how she can, whisper a sorry in Ashu's
Yeah.
ear at night. So maybe he'll dream about forgiving her, or, make it up and pass that extra slice of cake to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. We're in our 30s. We don't think about adolescence anymore. But the way that you've written it in the book, there's this raw honesty in the feelings and the changes that are happening, in the changes in what they're thinking, in their mind, in their body, both in Mira and Ashu, and Ashu's really good friend Rahul as
Yeah.
well, right? How did you make that happen? And why was it so necessary for you to be true to that real experience that young children or young people have as they're going through it?
Thank you, firstly. And, I feel that all adults, like the moment you step over that invisible threshold of, from teenagehood to adulthood, they sort of forget completely that they were real human beings before that point. Underestimated at all points, teenagers, children, almost as though they're lesser human beings, lesser mortals. And I've noticed that even when I was on the other side, when I was 15 and 16, perhaps navigating my own sort of similar feelings to Ashu and Meera as to just who the hell I am in this big world, um, and feeling that the adults didn't really get it. So one, I truly wanted to try and get closer to these voices, and I was obviously so attached to Meera and Ashu by the time I was done writing it, but just the process of understanding what goes on in their inner world, and that it's just as vast and rich as an adult's might be. In fact, honestly, much more. Meera's world is much
I
richer.
love her thinking. Oh my, it's so
Yeah.
bizarre, but it's amazing.
Yeah, she's just so much more open to experiences and observations, and not taking things at face value like we do. Like, we'll enter a room and not even take things in unless you have to write about it or something. It comes with the job. But coming back to what I was saying, yeah, I wanted to sort of, almost as though there's a camera, like zoom into the interior world of Ashu and Meera, and not write them in a way in which you often see teenagers in popular media and film, which is like sex starved, constantly abusive, completely dismissive of adults, just sort of these walking, talking cautionary tales, but actually just people who are really navigating a very difficult time, straddle between adulthood and childhood, yearning for both at the same time, and get closer, especially in the case of Ashu, to what are these gender roles that we've ascribed to children, that they can't really be who they are in all the spaces that are supposed to be safe for them, supposedly, home, school, any sort of adult situation. This need to have boys be boisterous and prescribe to this form of masculinity. Ashu, when he's in school, he feels like this wallflower, and he's observing how, if he has a more gentle conversation with his friend Rahul, for instance, in the hallway, people will stop to look, simply because they're so used to boys shoving each other and slapping each other and speaking louder than their voices can travel, and just not be gentle and kind to each other. So, yeah, I just wanted to understand that aspect of them.
So you've kind of talked about Ashu and Rahul's friendship. Their friendship gives Ashu the ability to blossom outside the home, and it's a very fragile friendship because you're right, it doesn't fit the conventional mold of what boy friendships are supposed to be. But why was it so important for Ashu to have that friend and that space to become himself?
Yeah, sometimes home is not the safe space that we think it to be. And for Ashu, he's a very reticent and reserved character. And in some ways, because he doesn't always feel the most loved at home, and there's a complexity of a relationship with his mother that we explore through the novel. But there are these underpinnings of resentment that he senses from her, that he's never really able to be himself at home. And then school also, which is that other space that he goes to, this other location, it's occupied by these notions of how he should be, and these boys who are quite troublesome, and there's Ishan isn't there, who is the bully in the school. Yeah, and then in between these two spaces, from the place he leaves in the morning, the place he has to get to every day, there is this walk he has with his friend Rahul. And in that walk, he's under the sun. He gets to be joyful and feel his heart thump in his chest, and be himself and be more humorous than people know him to be. Because actually, I think he's a very funny character, but it's the sarcastic, dry sort of humor that his sister will not get, his mother will not tolerate, and most people will simply
But
not
he's
be
kind of got it from his mother.
I really think so. Yes, I actually think that they have a lot more in common than
Yes.
they think they do.
Yes.
And we get to see it as the reader and the writer, but they just won't see it. They keep missing each other in the same house. Yeah, and so he needed that one space where he can truly be himself. And I wanted that for him. Maybe selfishly, at least for some time, I wanted him to be in the swimming pool and be with this friend, make these sarcastic jokes, even be grumpy. He doesn't get to be himself in most other places. So it was important for me to give him that friendship, which I wouldn't even like to define in any way. He loves his friend. What shape does that love take? What container does it go into? I'm not sure. He's just too young to put any labels on it, but it's a joyous place for him to be, briefly underneath the sun.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
So Ashu's character is kind of like a chameleon. He's different with every single character in the book. He's a very different person with Ma. He's a very different person with his sister. He's a very different person at school. He's a very different person with Rahul. And then he's a very different person with his cousin. But why do you think Ashu, but in the larger context, we as people now feel the need to change our personalities to kind of fit different scenarios again and again? I found that very interesting. Is that like a commentary that you're trying to make, or why was that?
I would say a lot of the fiction really just comes instinctively, and then you realize that you're looking at a larger problem or a larger situation. I mean, the world has always been a stage, and we're always bringing our performances to it. And I think it's amplifying with the Instagram that we're using and all the social media we're using. I saw this. I mean, I have to be honest, I saw this reel. I didn't read an article in which there were, the way in which people say hi is changing with the way social media reels are popping up,
Why?
Like, the way you set up the camera and you'll be like, hi guys. That's becoming the way in which people bring themselves to a party as well. Like we're learning from social media. I think we're always changing our face, and it's not new. It's not new. You at a workspace, you in a party, you with a certain friend group. Why is it so difficult to have a birthday party with all your friends together in it? Because they will see all sides of you, and suddenly you'll be at a loss of which part of yourself to project.
And you're always worried that these different groups are not going to mesh with one another.
And they actually don't, to be honest. And the bigger worry is that somebody gets really close without you, to be honest. But yeah. So what Ashu is experiencing at Meera's birthday party, being sort of wedged between his younger sister, his cousin, with whom he's trying to be really cool and have this face card, and then with her, she's just like, you're so silly, get away from my face, but I love you, it's your birthday, have some cake. There's this
Yeah.
like juggle of personalities, and it's I don't think it's just an Ashu thing. I think
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
everybody.
everybody thing. And for him particularly, he's a teenager, so you're not even sure of who you are. And
Yeah.
all he wants at the end of the day, and sometimes I feel like that too, all I want to do is just go back to my room and be myself, however it may be, without any performance pressure, without any right words to say, without thinking about which aspect of my personality to turn up and turn down, almost like, I don't know how
Yeah.
DJs work, but like
Yeah.
operating the different knobs and buttons of your
Mm-hmm.
personality. Yeah.
Okay, so I want us to talk a little bit about the mother now.
Hmm.
Ma, as she's known to Meera and Ashu, her name is Leela. Her sections in the book are very sparse and they're restrained in the way that you've written them. But they carry a lot of weight and they affect both Ashu and Meera's lives and whatever's happening in the background in pretty like big ways.
Yes.
How did you find her voice and why did you decide to share her story in the way that you did?
So at first, when I began writing Ma, it was a surprise to me because I had actually envisioned that the entire book will be Meera's story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was so mistaken. I was sorely mistaken. Also, I was writing my first novel, so it was a process of
Of course.
discovery. But Ma's voice just came in the exact way it is, very sharp, almost like an arrow in the dark. You don't see it coming. You're intrigued by it, but you also want to run away. Yeah, she's this character who's she's angry. She's angry, she's feral, she's inappropriate, you know. Um, she's deeply interior. Everything she's experiencing is happening inside of her. It's like a wave of emotions, and
Yeah.
she's the world around her is crashing at many points, and she's just absorbing it and absorbing it. And I think it makes her the character that she is. For me to write her was actually a lot of fun. Perhaps the
Really?
most fun
Oh,
because
wow.
yeah, she's inappropriate, right? And I think she says things like should I quote something?
Yeah.
She comes back from the gynecologist and the doctor's like, these are the periods in which you're fertile. And she's like, fertile, like I'm a fucking field of wheat. And she's just, it's almost like entering the skin of an anti hero. And it's really fun to play that part for a little while and say the things that sometimes everybody thinks, but you
Thanks.
don't say
Say.
it. Yeah,
Mhm.
fiction becomes that great place to explore these um, characters who look at life at a slant, in a more gray way. And yeah, I think the restraint that you're talking about and the sparseness of the information, the actual information that she offers, is because she's sort of chronicling her life
Yeah.
through solely her lens, and her lens is very interior. So she has an inability to see things with sort of like an outscope vision,
Mhm.
but she just sees things in a really interior way, and she looks at things so closely, the events that take place in her life, her marriage, the birth of her children, everything else sort of starts to fade. So
Hmm.
you know how when you look at any object with more detail, maybe even under the microscope,
Hmm.
say a leaf for instance, you look at it closely and everything in that vicinity becomes sharper and the background begins to blur. Or in a more sort of modern context, when we focus on our camera,
It's almost like tunnel vision that
it's
she
that,
has.
yeah, everything else is blurry. So for
Mhm.
her, she's so struck by grief of different kinds and
Mhm.
learning the early throes of motherhood and some sort of postpartum depression, that she's in this sort of crazy interior haze, and anything external doesn't really come into light or come into her parts of the story. And that's just her voice. But even as a character, she's very measured in what she wants to tell the children. She's
Mhm.
holding things back. I think we'll speak about this sort of in more detail, but she has this DNA of secrecy inside her.
She really does, and she seems really angry in general. I think just because of what she's experienced with the loss, with the trauma that she's gone through, and then losing a partner, But I think she doesn't think about how that affects the other people in her
Yeah,
life and
yeah.
the children in her life, because these children are dependent on her. But there are instances in the book where it kind of just seems like she is the dependent and not the
Hmm.
children,
The
because her
roles.
children have learned to skirt around her episodes.
Yeah.
And then they also get them,
Mhm.
right? It's like, hey, you've passed this down to me, now I also have this.
Yeah.
You've never given it a name and you've never dealt with
Hmm.
it in an actual medical manner. I'm assuming it's depression that she's going through.
I think so in parts, yes. And you hit the nail on the head. There is one part in the story where Ashu seriously wonders. He knows that he's not inherited, or he thinks he's not inherited anything from his mother. Her love of words and
Yeah.
reading, or her sense of humor, her wit. He thinks he's not got it. But he really worries whether he's got this one
The
gene,
darker
the
side of
darker
her. That
side,
really broke my heart.
that he'll wake up one day in the future, or maybe Mira will. He worries for his sister, and he'll feel like going back to bed, and like nothing is worth looking out at anymore. They have this dirty window in their room, in Ma's
Mm-hmm.
room, and Ashu suggests at some point, should we clean it so we can look outside? And Ma is like, there's no point. There's nothing to look outside at anyway. And in a way, I think that's Ma herself. She doesn't want to get rid of some of the murk. It's just sometimes you're not able to get rid of that murk, and sometimes you don't want to also wipe it off and really see the outside.
So, secrets play a really big role in this story, but I think in general, in families, secrets are everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Um, some are pretty obvious, some are unknown because they're secrets.
Hmm.
Um, but why is it that secrets became such a big um, element in this book, almost as if they are a character themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I really knew. I didn't know at the beginning that it would play such an important part, but it was obvious to me from the first scene that I started writing that this family is concealing things from each other. Um, that they will come to collide with the present in such a powerful manner and change the course of their lives was
Mm-hmm.
not something I anticipated. I do think that families and Indian families are susceptible to secrets because the communication lines are not always clear.
Mm.
We are packed like sardines in a tin, uh, and so sort of shoved up in each other's space, some not by choice most of the time. And there's so much to negotiate on the daily. There's very little space and empathy to really ask questions to the other person about who they are, what they're going through, what might they have carried from the previous day, the previous year, the previous decade.
Mm-hmm.
And so secrets become this subliminal sort of language which is just embedded between the words we say to each other. This is, maybe it's in the womb and it just passes down from generation to generation. We don't even know we have this propensity for it. Like you said, there are the important things, the things that we think we can shove into the closet. We all have something that we're concealing from people. Sometimes secrets feels like a school word almost. um, but we're all keeping things. It can be a small thing, it can be a comment that
Mm-hmm.
we're keeping from somebody, and it can be a much larger sort of floodgate that could change things. um, and yeah, I think they come and go with the proximity. On the other hand, you could say that they will also grow with distance. So I don't know what the right way is. Maybe all families will always deal with this, with what to say, how much to say, and what to ask, how much to ask.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this sense of, and I can speak for this story. There's so much judgment sometimes, and fear of it, that like Ashu keeps little things from his family, things that maybe people won't even judge him for, but for Ma would accept about him if perhaps the communication was better, less patchy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is this sort of identity struggle, and how other people are seeing you, and if they're going to even disown you, because families can be quite brutal that way, that you better follow this path and this chart that we have set out for you, or some astrologer has set out for you, or something that I saw in a dream, um, or we won't really love you the same way.
So there are many instances in the book where characters get to know secrets that they are not supposed to know, that are not their secrets to keep. But it kind of then ends up eating at them, or it changes things for them, right? Can we talk about that a little?
Maybe some secrets should be secrets, That's what I realized as I was writing this. So when you have your own secret, there's shame associated, right? There's a reason why you're holding on to something. You're scared of being perceived a certain way, or letting things out into the open that could affect your relationships, living or dead. And then, when somebody stumbles upon someone else's secret, or even in our lives, when a friend shares something that really isn't yours to have with you, doesn't it feel so heavy? um Almost like the ownership was not yours, was not meant to be with you. And in the case of this book, the characters are younger, so when they encounter truths that were hidden somewhat messily from them, uh, I think it changes the entire dynamic of your relationships with those around you, and imbues you with the burden of knowledge and of adulthood. So you have to grow up faster, and you still have to keep the secret. You still have to be a secret keeper, because there are others who could be affected by it.
Yeah.
So the chain goes on in a way. I think you're still protecting somebody, and yeah, secrets, I don't know if you can ever really truly bury them, but some of them probably are best if they're going to hurt somebody else, to keep them away.
The way you've written the book, it goes from one character's voice to another, and sometimes Ashu is told in third person as well. Was this a deliberate choice that you made of writing it to show, I guess, to the readers the emotional distance that these characters are feeling from one another, or did it just happen?
Some of them were dictated by the character. So Meera and Ma are told in the first person, because I guess as people, they are more aware of what they're going through. Not to say they're self-aware characters, Ma certainly isn't, but they sort of are more cognizant of their emotional vocabulary, right or wrong. um, and their voices, though they're in the first person, to me they're still very different from one another, because even the first person can have different ways of showing itself. So for Meera, she's 8, right? And her narrative is very babbling child who can't stop asking questions, is curious about how volcanoes are formed and trees grow, and whether she's loved more or if her brother is loved more, and the sort of questions that keep on coming at you. So it's that I'm seeing everything and I'm thinking everything and saying everything voice.
Yeah.
And Ma, who is also in the first person, we touched upon this a little earlier, but she's more interior, she's more focused. There's a touch of the surreal in her voice, where reality and what might blend with the surreal, and you don't really know what is taking place. So at the very beginning, Ashu's a baby and she's trying to pick him up, and she literally cannot, or so she thinks, pick him up. He becomes an object, almost like rocks, and she's unable to hold him. So there is that flavor to Ma's storytelling. And then there's Ashu, who I tried very much to, for the sake of uniformity, to write in the first person. And oh, it was so bad. I cannot.
Why?
I wrote it so badly. It took me a few months. I mean, I wrote it as a way to understand what Ashu's point of view was, and what his story could, and what the unfolding events could be. But I had to write it all over again from the third person, because this was a character who really did lack the vocabulary and the skill to analyze what he's feeling at every moment. he also isn't the best with words. He's that isn't his way of looking at the world. Maybe he's more visual a character, more intuitive a character. We don't really get a chance to find out, but for him, that interior world, there's a distance between it. I think it's also a coping mechanism. There's so much that he's going through that he rather just be a teenage boy and go meet his friend than think about why he feels so lonely at home, or why
Mm-hmm.
there are these undercurrents in the room. So the third person narrator who observes Ashu, like hovers close to him like a little bee almost, was the best way for me to look at Ashu, make sense of the things that he may not be able to make sense of, with some of the knowledge and insight that a narrator, an external narrator, can bring, dipping in and out of this adolescent boy's yearnings
Oh,
and desires.
interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think because you are a woman
Hmm.
and you also didn't go through adolescence as a boy,
Yeah.
that's why you found it more difficult to write him?
I definitely think so. At first, so many of the stereotypes that I'm trying to question in the novel came flying at me. One of the scenes I was trying to write terribly was him trying to play video games with Rahul. I'm like, I don't know the first thing about video games. Why do boys have to be doing this only? Like my own stereotypes were coming to the fore. What do boys talk about?
What do they talk about?
I'm not sure, but if it's Ashu, I'll get along with him. He's a more interesting boy
That's
than many
really
others.
interesting. That does say something about men written by women as opposed to men written by men.
And women written by men. Yeah, I guess I was just like, let me understand Ashu's score better. Because I don't know what teenage boys talk about. But I think contrast is a great thing. With the contrast of the boys that he was facing and navigating in
Mm-hmm.
school, and the groups that form the typical groups of boys, teenage boys, it was easier for me to see who Ashu wasn't, who they were and
Mm-hmm.
who Ashu wasn't. So if they
Mm-hmm.
were this way, what was Ashu like? How did he compare himself to other boys? And
Yeah.
within that framework of the men and the boys and the teenagers that I wrote in the novel, I started to understand who Ashu really may be. And a lot
Uh-huh.
of who we are is a consequence of other people around us. So when I understood Mira, when I understood Ma, Ashu came to sort of make sense.
Oh, that's nice. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the way that you've written the book, it is jumping from one character to another, right? Um, was that an intentional choice that you made to make it reflect the emotional distance or experiential difference that the characters are feeling? Or again, did that just emerge organically?
So surprisingly, my initial drafts did not have this structure at all. They were at that time, it was entirely one voice, then entirely another voice, and at some point the voices start to merge and
Oh,
clash, and
wow.
share space within the book. But the way I envisioned it earlier was that let them each tell their story, and then everything's a surprise when we come to the other voice. The things that a first character
Oh.
misunderstood or couldn't see. Um, so that was a product of good conversations with my editor, and thinking about the book structure as a way of the family dynamics, like you suggested. So sort of, what are the ways in which families speak to each other, sometimes interrupt each other, clash with one another. So in that manner, the voices now, they alternate between Mira, Ashu, Ma, and it makes sense now this in this manner, but it's not the way I earlier thought of it to be. And I like it better this way because in a way, I enjoyed the piecing together of narratives and timelines and stories and thoughts through like little joints between the chapters. So what is the last sentence of what Mira's seeing in her world?
Mm-hmm.
Where is Ashu in his emotional landscape or physical landscape? What's he at? Are they completely disjointed, or are they
Mm-hmm.
on the same page? So it was interesting to do that. And then apart from the voices themselves, the book is broken up into um, sort of little sections which are demarcated by the verbs related to swimming. So plunge, float, sink, etc., etc. That structure was always at the back of my mind too, because of the water, the element of water in this book. Somebody once suggested to me that the book resembles a swimming, floating, sinking structure because of the three voices, and also in fiction, in storytelling, there is this sort of conventional three arcs structure to a novel. I had that at the back of my mind, and so when I was playing with all of these different strings, you know how you're braiding something.
Yeah.
I was braiding these voices together. I was also thinking, it would be so great to bring those verbs back and to take the reader through their own journey of swimming through these sections, and how do they emerge from these very murky waters themselves.
How lovely. And this is such a perfect segue to my next question.
Which is
Physical spaces take up a lot of space in hot water, right? The pool, the changing room, the school, the home, the road that they're walking on, the farm.
yeah.
Was that intentional for you to draw out your characters in that way, giving them enough space to do this in these areas? Again, just like silences, they do feel like characters in themselves in the book, right?
I'm so glad that they do, particularly because I was concerned that there are very few locations in this book, actually. It's a very domestic novel. And the home you mentioned is, I think, a majority sort of the book takes place within the confines of their tiny home, and the ways in which they're sharing a space, watching TV on the sofa, so up in each other's space that they can't breathe sometimes, except for Mira, of course, who loves being in between her brother and Ma, and sort of the younger child syndrome of wanting to be everywhere all at once. But yeah, there is this sense of breeding claustrophobia that I wanted to instill, and I hope I achieved some of in the setting, in that closeness of the room, the closeness of the quarters, and how that makes the characters feel that it's such a hot summer. The sweat is trickling down their backs, and there's a cooler. So 90s, right? And
We still have
smell
a
of
cooler at home.
oh, how nice! Okay, so that smell of hay or whatever that is coming through their nose, and they're just trying to escape and breathe, and that's definitely a metaphor for something larger. And then apart from the home, the swimming pool is my favorite setting in the book. And what I love about it is two things. One, I think it's the perfect setting for teenagers to have a little something going on. It's the breeding ground for sort of adolescent desire and awkwardness. You're half naked. You're around people that you you kind of like.
You
You're
want to
friends
show
with.
off.
You want to show off. You're feeling self-conscious about the ways your shorts are clinging to your body.
Yeah.
You want to feel really cool and do a somersault or a handstand, but then right immediately after the water floods into your nose, you're feeling really lame. So it's this, tussle of all the things we feel as a teenager, I'm sure even as an adult, but I love it as a space for Ashu and his exploration of his identity and friendship. I also love the pool setting for another reason that's slightly veering on the more poetic side, which is that when you're in water, you're floating, right? You're occupying two spaces at once. Thank you. Yeah. And you know how you're inside the world and outside of it. You're inside your body and outside of it. It feels like you're in air, you're in water. And that's the feeling that a lot of these characters are feeling, right? They feel apart from the people they're with. So how Mira, Ashu, and Ma are also so sort of inside their own heads at all times, and they feel separate from the people that they're actually with and misunderstood at times. It's that same feeling, I think, that is mimicked by just floating in water.
That's so lovely, and that's why you're a writer and I'm not. Because when I'm in water, I'm just like, oh, I can't hear anything. It's quiet.
So Mira thinks those things also. She says, that being in water feels like that feeling of putting your head on the school desk.
Yeah.
And when like those sounds are traveling through the wood, I mean, those are all observations we have. So yeah.
Oh, wow. How lovely. That is actually very poetic and very beautiful.
Thank you so much.
um, so your
Mhm.
work has been compared to the works of Elena Ferrante and Arundhati Roy, especially in how you write about the interior lives of children. Is that Are those who you're taking inspiration from as you're writing, or do you have other sources of inspiration? Where does it come from?
Well, I have to say I have not heard that before, and definitely not Elena Ferrante. So I am very flummoxed, and yeah, that sounds like really high praise. But definitely, these are some of the writers I have read and admired on a sentence level, but also on a narrative, like larger narrative scale. Like I loved the Neapolitan novels, and in the way in which Ferrante writes about the inner worlds of people, you're absolutely right, and also about sort of the push and pull of being a child, um, and how you're experiencing life. Of course, The God of Small Things is a huge inspiration. That book is one of my absolute favorites. I have 3 copies of it in different bookshelves. Yeah, because everywhere I've moved around a lot. So everywhere I went, if I didn't have a copy, I thought I should. So I picked one up and I have one signed copy.
Oh,
I'm very
wow.
happy about that.
Lucky.
Yeah, and so many other writers really. It's such a sort of process of taking things in without knowing it. But I really admire Jerry Pinto's writings. For instance, I have loved while growing up Jane Austen.
Of
You
course.
know, I don't know what you pick up from somebody, what becomes part of your own sort of writing style, but um, these are some of the writers I love. I really, really like this Nigerian writer called Ayobami Adebayo.
Okay.
She writes about the domestic in a way that almost feels thrilling.
Oh,
And, you know, even if you're writing just about relationships, how can you still keep a reader on the edge of what's
yeah.
going to happen? Like I like people who can do that. And you know, I already mentioned, but Call Me by Your Name is something that I thought about when writing about teenage boys and desire. I really, really had to have read Room by Anna Dominahue to know how to write from a child's perspective. If that book didn't exist, I don't know if I would have known how to try and wear the skin of a child in
Oh, wow.
fiction. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I must ask you, where did the inspiration for the book come from?
That I don't know. You know, I was writing a lot of short fiction when I one day wasn't. I just sort of started writing a scene with Mira walking into a room and Ma and Ashu on a sofa, right? And she senses this disquiet in this room and she's trying to keep things all normal, but she knows there's something wrong. And that's it. That's where the scene ends. Um, and then began sort of the summer of COVID of 2020. And I decided to start writing this novel. I had a dissertation project, and I thought, you know, it's not, let me just write a little bit more. Let it be a novella. I couldn't really fathom writing a novel because it felt really ambitious to do. And yeah, somewhere the idea was just sort of germinating. It came from the voice of Mira. And as I started writing Mira and kept writing Mira, all the other characters and the structures and the physical
Wow.
spaces came into being. But in a way, first novels, they say, are not made in a day, or, you know, it's not one instance. It's kind of your entire life has been leading up to it. And they also say it's a lot like your life. This book doesn't feel like my life. You know, there's so many different threads, things I haven't experienced at all. But I do think you carry a part of your childhood into your first novel, which is why a lot of them do have this sense of coming of age in them, like these characters do as
Oh,
well.
lovely. How long did it take you to write the book?
From the writing the first word to it being out, it took 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a long game of patience, and it takes even longer sometimes.
How many versions of the book did we have?
We have had several versions. We have folders into folders, a lot of inception. I say around 10 drafts, but my drafts are different, at least in this book. I have the voice quite sort of nailed. It's the ways in which they play with each other and they're set against each other, that changed a lot. So the beginning, the ending, it really pretty much is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The plot events have not changed, but the structure took time to
I love that
get
every
to.
author that we have interviewed has had a very different way of writing,
Yeah.
and very different ways of drafting their work, right? The evolution of work is so interesting to hear about.
It's so depressing to go through. And you always think when you start a project that, yeah, I'm gonna be fine. It's not gonna be me when you hear other authors interviewing and saying it took 10 years or 10 drafts or whatever. And then you find yourself like, it is me. And it is a game of patience.
But it's out now and it's beautiful and
Yeah,
it's
it's
well
worth the
received.
work. I think
Yes.
I think you can always like sort of think, what if I could go back and tell myself to do this exactly? But would I have fun? Would I discover the characters in the same way? Would it come out like this? I'm not sure.
Something for you to learn for your next novel.
Yeah, new mistakes to make.
Exactly. Okay, can we talk a little bit about the title and the cover?
Yes, gladly so. The process of the cover, I think anybody who's not familiar with publishing might think that the author decides everything, but that's not necessarily true. Although I had a wonderful team with whom I could actually communicate and I could share what I thought. So when I started speaking of the cover, I thought that there should be a very bold and clean cover with sort of a domestic object or one singular object on the page that has a touch of the surreal. So say a pot of water, but with its neck twisted, or just a kettle, something to symbolize the water. I wanted to bring the home out in the cover. And I shared that vision with the team, and they came up with this. So they had the singular object, they had the bold, clean type, and the lack of sort of mess and extraneous detail. But they took it outside the home and into the setting, which is so important for the book, the swimming pool. And I loved what they did, even though it was so different than what I had thought, because I think when you see it at first, you think, oh, it's like a light book, it's a
Absolutely.
summer read.
Yeah.
It is a summer read of a different kind. But if you really look at it for a second longer, I feel like it gives this sense of something being amiss. Why is there a float but nobody in it? Where are the people? What are these undercurrents? There are these dark patches in the water, the sense that something has come and gone. So to me, it also felt eerie, but it's almost like if you know, you know. So I really love that. And the designer is Bonita Vashimre from HarperCollins. She really understood the setting of the book and brought it out. And the title, I fear my answers are very similar. It was a process. It was a process.
What did you start with for the title?
Oh, so the first title was The Silent Treatment, which is something that Ma often doles out to the children. It did not work at all. I liked it, but people didn't think that it really captured everything in the book. And ultimately, a book has to be sort of, the title has to be catchy.
Yeah.
At some point, the book was titled The Book of Ma, because Ma became, to me, this engine without whom the book couldn't exist and the characters couldn't exist, and neither could the secrets. And then ultimately, I told you how the structure became about swimming and the cover became, sort of the swimming pool, that I was only thinking in terms of fluidity. What is it like to be in water, swimming lessons, all sorts of titles, about a document of 200, 300 titles. I was desperate at that point. How do you find one word or two words that talk about everything, that talk about childhood and love and grief, and you realize you can't talk about it all, but you can hint at something. And hot water, the phrase means to be in trouble, and I think it's a season of being in hot water for these characters. The unexpected ripple of things that start to surface in their lives, the people that emerge from the past, the secrets that rise to the surface. And then also hot water, it can be life-giving water, but hot water can scald you, it can burn you, and that's the sense of being with these members, this communication and miscommunication. What does it leave you with? And does it tear you apart or keep you together?
So you're right when you point out that like the title of the book and the cover of the book do give the perception of it being a very light, easy, breezy summer read. That's what I thought it was first when I picked it up. And then you start reading it, you're like, that's really not what this is. However, I'm intrigued and I want to continue to read it. So I think it's the perfect balance of that marketability of something and that jumping out in a shelf of books, right, to get the reader to actually pick it up.
Yeah, so important.
Exactly, because you do want people to buy your book.
Yeah, you're not writing, you're not throwing something into the oblivion.
Exactly, but I think once you get into the story itself it's so gripping because I felt like I didn't really know what was happening, but I was in it and I was feeling feelings and I was like, now we're just in it.
Yeah.
It's going. But yeah, and I really I enjoy looking at this cover and it does attract the eye. And I just, because of the, I think, disconnect with how light and airy the cover looks at first and the themes that the book is talking about, I really liked that contrast between the two, which is why I wanted to ask you about it.
A bit jarring, I'm guessing.
It is a little, but then once you're in it, you're like, hey, this is actually not that bad.
And there is a lot of swimming pools and summer. And, if you want to call it a summer day, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So has a reader ever pointed out a detail or a scene in the book that was unexpected for you or also changed the way that you actually thought about it?
Definitely. At some point, somebody told me that Ma is the Ashu of her family, like the one she comes from.
Okay.
And it was such a brilliant observation because of the generational sort of inheritances and traumas that we were speaking of. She too is sort of this misunderstood person. She is maybe the lesser loved person, at least seemingly so. And that was something that really made me think about my characters and look at them anew. And I really think that, as a writer, your job is done at some point, and other people will continue to bring to you observations and patterns that they could see that you couldn't.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And now that you've pointed it out, I'm also thinking and I'm like, she did keep to herself a lot. And she was a little mysterious and unknown to her family.
Yes.
And she existed in the same space as them, but she kind of minded her own business.
And she was observing other people's relationships and feeling out of it.
That's so interesting. Oh, people are so astute. Readers are so astute.
They really are. They're the reason why we write books.
Okay, so if we strip away all the events of the book and you're left with the emotions, what is it that this book is actually trying to get people to think about?
So I suppose a few things are at the heart of this book. One, what are the ways in which we love the people we're closest to? But also on the flip side, what are the ways in which we withhold love? We always think about the giving of something, but how does holding something back, love, attention, a kind word, how does that affect the people around us? Two, what are the expectations we place on mothers and single mothers in the world that we're in? How much do we judge them? And must boys always be boisterous but not gentle and kind? And very lastly, to Meera and Ashu, what is it like to be a child in a world of adults, by adults, for adults? And how can we see and listen to children better?
That's beautiful. I think you do accomplish that in the book, especially the allowing people to feel and experience life the way a child would. Because it makes you think twice about what we expect of children around us also. So I think that's beautiful.
Thank you.
I really like that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, are you ready for rapid fire now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, let's go. Ashu or Meera, whose head was more difficult to get into?
Ashu.
Ashu.
Definitely.
Okay, because he's a boy?
He's a boy. I don't get that.
That's fair. If hot water was a drink, what drink would it be? And you can't say actual hot water.
You literally stopped
No,
me.
you
Okay,
can't.
fine. Fine, that was going to be my cheeky answer. But I think it would be like a cocktail
Okay.
which has mango flavor in it. But it's going to have something really strong like whiskey or bourbon. I'm not a bartender. I don't know if it sounds horrible. And to top it off, it'll have like a rim of popping candy, you know, magic pop, just for the touch of childhood.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of layers to this drink.
Sounds like a bad drink, but it's a good book, hopefully.
If we have any mixologists listening, guys, let's
try.
let's have a recipe. One childhood smell that instantly takes you back.
Can I give two?
Yes.
Chlorine, yeah, and pools, of course, and the fake strawberry scent of those erasers that was shaped like strawberries.
Oh my God, that's
You
so
know?
specific, and now I can
Yeah.
smell it too.
Yeah, it's always there.
Okay. A word you overused in your first draft.
Faintly.
Faintly. And how many times is it used in the final?
Probably
draft?
still there.
And did you ever count it with word search?
No, I just know it's always there. It's faintly present in the novel.
Okay. What's your comfort food or snack while writing?
I think chocolate would be my favorite.
And is it dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Is white not an option?
Oh, hey, why?
No, milk. Just
Milk.
kidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Milky Bar used to be very good. No? Okay, milk. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So, you asked me a few questions, and I thought that since you also belong to a house of siblings, did you see any similarities in Meera and Ashu's relationship in your home? Do you, for instance, sometimes feel telepathy with your siblings?
I don't feel it. You're saying this because we're recording and my sister's here and we're giving a lot of similar answers. I don't feel it, but I think the way our brains work, we do notice and say similar things.
Yeah.
I'm sure my brother would disagree, but I think it's because he hasn't lived with us for such a long time. But if he started living with us like for prolonged periods of time, I think he would also
Start
in.
talking like you. Yes.
Exactly. But yeah, I think growing up, when I'm the middle child, my sister's 3.5 years elder to me, my brother's 3.5 years younger to me.
Sandwich.
Exactly. Perfect family planning. But I think the problem was that our ages made it such that the sweet moments that Ashu and Meera had, we didn't have because we were in such different phases of our lives. And the way reality is and the pressures that we put on children now, you have to go to school, you have to go to tuition, you have to go do this, you have to go do that. So even though when we were younger, we would do our summers together and everything, as we started growing older, I think we didn't have as much time with one another because we needed to go to school, we needed to go to tuition, we needed to do this, we needed
and then
to do
someone
that.
goes to college by the time.
Exactly, right? So then by the time I became old enough to be my own person, be my own fun person, my sister was gone, my brother was too young for me. And then by the time Aditya became older, I was gone to college, Anshul was already at college. So then, but those moments when we were in college in the same cities, which were few, that was really nice because then we did get to spend time with one another and experience life with one another as adults.
As adults.
Exactly.
Full-blown personalities
or like
of their
people
own.
who are still coming into their own, but you're not a child anymore.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. So I see parts of myself in this book, but in general, also as an adult, I see the emotions that the children are feeling, and I still see those emotions in myself feeling them, which is why I really liked it.
We were all kids once.
Exactly, and we still are.
We still are, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Bhavika, thank you so much for this really fun conversation. I know the book looks light, it isn't light. There are very heavy themes that it's touching on, but this was such a nice conversation.
Yes.
Thank you for being so candid and so honest with us.
Thank you so much. I love the questions.
Thank you. And for our listeners and viewers, I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and also go pick up the book. It's a fun read. It's a quick read but it will leave you thinking. That's all for today. Thanks.